All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 10. So, in the last three chapters, we discussed the experimental design in some detail. And recall the purpose of the experimental design is to establish a cause and effect relationship between your variables. Now, in order for this to happen, a number of criteria have to be met. For example, it isn't merely enough to compare groups against one another, but you also have to manipulate the independent variable in your study. Now, as you may imagine, there are many situations in which manipulating the independent variable is either impossible or highly unethical. In which case, you have no choice but to conduct a study that in some ways falls short of a true experiment. So this chapter covers these other what are called non-experimental or quasi-experimental strategies that again fall short of a true experiment. So this chapter begins by discussing a rather intriguing study on the relationship between adversity and well-being. So the question is whether adversity is good for us, or should it be avoided? So the study compared the well-being of three groups: those who faced no adversity, those who faced some adversity, and those who faced a lot of adversity. And the findings are that people who faced some adversity had higher levels of well-being than people who faced a lot of adversity, but they also had higher levels of well-being than people who faced no adversity. So it appears, based on the results of the study, that some adversity is actually good for us. And so if you were to plot the data, it might look something like an upside down U function, where there's a sweet spot for adversity. And this supports the idea of what Nassim Taleb called anti-fragility. So the idea being that some systems in the world are fragile, meaning they break very easily and need to be protected and bubble wrapped like a wine glass. Other systems, by contrast, are robust, meaning that they are very difficult to damage no matter what you do to them. And finally, some systems are anti-fragile, meaning they actually grow stronger when they face adversity, when they are challenged in some way. Like, for example, muscles in the body. If you go to the gym and challenge your muscles, they get stronger and grow. If you were to stop using your muscles and lay in bed all day, they would atrophy and wither away. So Taleb argues that we humans are anti-fragile, meaning that we need to be challenged in some way. We have to face some degree of adversity in order to thrive. But of course, there are limits. It probably has to be the right type of adversity in the right amount. If it's too much, it can destroy you, just like lifting a weight that's too heavy can hurt you. Anyway, this study seems to support that idea that some adversity is actually better than no adversity. Anyway, moving back to the topic of this chapter, if you look at this study and its components, it involves collecting measurements, making comparisons between groups. So it has the appearance of a legit experiment of the sort that we discussed in previous chapters. But of course, if you look closely, you will notice that it's missing certain key ingredients. For example, manipulation of the independent variable. Well, in this case, you can't really manipulate whether someone's life is full of adversity or not. You can't assign people to different life trajectories that are all the same except for the amount of adversity that they will face. You can't do that. So this study, while very interesting and thought-provoking, does fall short of a true experiment. And so we cannot state with any certainty that the relationship between adversity and well-being is a causal one. Now, that doesn't mean that studies like this should be ignored or never conducted. If that were the case, probably half of psychologists would be out of work. But it does mean that we have to understand these sorts of studies and their limitations. Right, so in this chapter, we will be discussing these other non-experimental and quasi-experimental research strategies. And we will discuss them in the context of between subjects designs, within subject designs, and also we're going to look at developmental research designs as well. And for the chapter limerick, true experiments, while fundamental, have criteria strict and judgmental. Can't control or assign? There's still much to divine from studies non-experimental.